On behalf of Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to GLF's Brave New World. And I do hope you have a wonderful weekend. Those of you who missed our earlier sessions with Elizabeth Gilbert, Alif Shafak, Benjamin Moser, Jhumpa Lahiri, Gloria Steinem, and so many others, you can catch them on our Facebook page, GLF Litfest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest GLF. Our official radio partner is Red FM Bajate Raho. Our session today on GLF's Brave New World is Ruskin Bond, Looking for the Rainbow, in conversation with Namita Gokhale. India's most beloved and prolific storyteller tells of his incredible journey. Ruskin Bond, who has penned over 100 books, joins Namita Gokhale in an inspirational session to share his vision of the joy, spontaneity, and clarity he brings to his writing and his life. Ruskin Bond was born in Kasauli, Himachal Pradesh in 1934 and grew up in Jamnagar, Gujarat, Dehradun, New Delhi, and Shimla. His first novel, The Room on the Roof, which was written when he was 17, received the John Rhys Memorial Prize in 1957. Since then, he has written over 500 short stories, essays, and novellas, including Vagrants in the Valley and A Flight of Pigeons, and many more books for children. He received the Sahitya Academy Award for English Writing in India in 1993 and the Padma Shri in 1999. This is Ruskin Bond's birthday week. He turns 86, and it is our pleasure to have recorded him in advance from his house in Landor, Missouri. Namita Gokhale is an award-winning writer, publisher, and festival director. She is the author of 19 books, including 10 works of fiction. Her latest novel, Jaipur Journals, was released in January 2020. Namita Gokhale is also co-founder and co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. Please do comment by typing it into the comment section. Do also follow our handles. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest GLF, and of course, you can hang in there on Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, Ruskin Bond, Looking for the Rainbow, in conversation with Namita Gokhale.
Hello, dear Ruskin. What a delight to have India's most beloved writer with us at the JLF Brave New World. I have so many memories of time spent with you, including, as you may remember, a very long ago birthday festival in Missouri when you and I and the world were all younger. Do you remember what a lovely time we had? You took us for a walk through the graveyard, if you remember.
That's right. I've stopped visiting graveyards ever since I got into my 70s, actually. So I think that that particular walk happened probably 15, 20 years back.
Lovely. So now this is a birthday week too. And we want your friends, your fans, your admirers to wish you a very happy birthday. So any birthday thoughts about birthdays in general, yours and the world's?
Yes. Well, I've never been a great one for celebrating birthdays. It's only in recent years that, readers or fans or publishers or, people have sort of started noticing the fact maybe that I'm getting older and need to have a birthday party now and then. Well, this year, of course, we're all locked up, and I'll be really looking forward tomorrow to a quiet, peaceful birthday without tourists banging on the door and without car horns blowing on the road beneath. So I'll be here with my books. Writing pad, comfortable bed to take a nap on, and of course, Bina and Rakesh will see to it that I get a great lunch and dinner too.
Lovely. And a cake?
Cake, there will be a cake, but I'm not a cake person.
Not a cake person.
No, I'm into things like tikkis and chole bhature and chaat and golgappa, street food. not much in the way of sweets.
That will have to wait for a while till the virus gets over. I think I'll come over and celebrate a delayed birthday with you.
Good.
So, also, I'm told that this year, 2020, marks almost 70 years of your writing career. How many books have you written? I've asked publishers to research this, and I've received the most vague replies, over 100 books, or almost 200 books. So, how many exactly? Which are your favorites? Which genre do you enjoy the most?
Well, publishers won't know exactly because I've had so many publishers too over the years. And but and I haven't counted. So
Make a wild guess.
actual titles would be up in around 150 or more. But some would be collections or anthologies, children's books too, which are very slim. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm sort of working day and night and turning out thousands and thousands of words. I'm not.
Or that you have some elves in your cupboard who write the books for you.
Pardon?
I said maybe there are some elves in your cupboards who write the books for you.
That's true. There is a little demon somewhere or a devil that sort of helps me do them. And I started so young. You see, I was after out of school, 16, when I started bombarding magazines and newspapers with little stories and articles and vignettes. That was 1951. So right, about 70 years. And the first story that was published was in the Illustrated Weekly of India, which was then a sort of a popular family magazine. And that was in the summer of 51.
Nice.
Well, but a lot of stories came back in those days. So you shouldn't get the impression that I was a sort of big success overnight. I wasn't. And lots of rejections. And even my first novel went the rounds of publishers too before it finally got published.
Which was that, the first novel?
Well, that was when my mother packed me off to England in the end of 51. And when I got there and feeling so homesick for India, I started writing this first novel of mine. And it was based on the journal that I'd kept in Dehradun that particular year before leaving. So it was a combination of diary, which got turned into fiction. And then after going to 2 or 3 publishers or several, it finally found a sympathetic editor in Diana Athill, who was then a woman who was a very good editor, but she hadn't done much writing. She did later on become well known as a writer. But anyway, she took me on and made me rewrite that book about at least 3 times before they finally agreed to publish it. So it was, I had to persevere and work hard on it.
Fascinating.
So a lot of people think you just have an overnight success, write a book, it's published and there's fame, but it's not like that really, as you will know and as most writers know.
Certainly know. Yes. But you've done so many genres and so many styles of writing. Which is your favorite?
I guess a lot of my work is autobiographical, although I fictionalize things very often. So I turn people I know, I put them into stories or I change them around. I write a lot about childhood. In fact, before I started writing for children, I was writing about childhood, but sometimes for adults. Sort of looking back into my own childhood, which was I won't say very difficult, but there were times when it was lonely or traumatic, and so that sort of came into my writing. And then as I got older, I started trying different genres, writing about wildlife or writing about nature, writing about ghosts.
Yeah, you're a master of the ghost story.
Ghost story. And I have to confess, I've yet to meet a ghost. Huh? So, um, and and I don't want to, but
Yeah,
happy to make them up.
yeah, better to make them up. Tell us about your discipline of writing, of how you write, when you write.
Usually in the mornings. Early morning is a good time. One is fairly fresh.
What is early morning for you?
Well, it can vary from 7 o'clock, or it can be 9 o'clock before breakfast. Uh, and then I sort of work up an appetite while I'm writing, because I like breakfast. So I said I must earn my breakfast. So I'll write my 500 words or something around that. And
And in a notebook?
yes, by hand usually.
Mhm.
Always I've written by hand, but because in the old days you had to submit your work typed. So
Yes.
I had an old typewriter for years. I still got it, but I don't use it now.
But would you use the typewriter for your first draft, or even then you would
So
try?
in those days, I use it for the final draft, the one I submitted.
And any particular kind of pen you're particularly fond of, or pencils, or any color?
I use a ballpoint pen, and over the years, I've become a bit partial towards the color jamun, a purple
Oh,
pen.
lovely. I'm one for purple pens also.
You like purple pens? Well, it goes back to the time when I was in my 30s in Delhi, and I was in love with a girl who always wore a purple sort of dupatta or kameez. And we used to go to India Gate and eat jamuns, which are purple too, purple juice. So I've sort of nostalgia. I have a tendency towards
It's a
purple.
beautiful insight. And after this interview, I'll tell you about my purple obsession. To go on from the color purple, which is a theme in my new novel, The Jaipur Journals, which is one of the few novels you haven't blurbed. But in this wonderful book of yours, titled In the Beauty of All My Days, you say, we come into this world pure and innocent, but it doesn't take long for us to be tainted and corrupted by the warped civilization that prevails around us. It sounds a lot more lofty than you often write, but I know that you've written that from your heart. I want to know, you write for children, you write for grown-ups, and you write for the child within. Who exactly do you write for? How old do you feel inside you? Where is this child? This child who has never left you?
Well, I think basically we write for ourselves, don't we? Yeah? I think I've always, in a way, written for myself, or maybe for imaginary reader who is a projection of myself, or the ideal reader you think who's on the same wavelength. But yes, and as for innocence, yesterday morning I got up very early, 5 in the morning, and I looked out of the window, and there was a half moon in the eastern sky, and below it there was the glow of the sun, which was going to rise in a little while. So there was sun, moon, and sky all together, and it was so beautiful. Then I thought, human beings are the only people who have or the only living things that have the intelligence and sensitivity to appreciate the wonders of nature. And yet, we too are the same ones who go out of our way to degrade it and destroy it. So what a contradiction it is. After all, the animal world, beautiful though it is, they're not going to appreciate the sunset.
So we think,
Hmm?
who knows?
Who knows? All right. It's difficult to...
Like birds certainly appreciate the sunrise. They are the one in the highest of the branches is the one to greet it, and it has some visceral understanding of sunrise.
Yes.
And also of sunset. They as the sun sets, they begin their evening chorus.
I think but they are living in a way almost by instinct,
Yes.
as we do to a great extent.
So
And
how old is the child within you? Is that
the child within me depends on the weather.
how old is the
if I,
child within you today?
if it's if I wake up in the morning and it's cold and gloomy and miserable outside, then I feel I'm 86. But if I wake up and the sun is out and there are birds chirping at the window, and all is bright and merry, then I'm 16 again.
Lovely. I'm glad you're 16 because we want you
I'm
into this 86 into 16 mathematics.
I'm influenced by the climate, I think. I'm somehow happier in warm weather, and yet ironically, here I live up on a mountain where it can get very cold. So there's no logic to it at all.
Take us to your childhood, your memories of your father.
Well, yes, I have my early memories are of almost like fairyland. I mean, there we were in this little state called Jamnagar on the west coast of India and Kathiawar. It was a little port, and it was ruled by a prince who was called the Jam Sahib. And in fact, that was the state where cricket began in India with
Yes.
Ranjit Singh, who was the ruler once, then his nephew Dalip Singh and others. And my father used to run a small palace school for the girls because they weren't sent to, outside to schools in those days. And I would attend the classes there. And that's how I learned to read, upside down, in fact, because I would stand on the opposite side of the desk of my favorite princess and watch her reading.
Oh, sweet.
Hmm? And then it was a very open sort of. There was a city too, but most of the residential areas were very open. So there were lawns and gardens, and there was the sea close by. So we were there till I was about 6. Then World War II broke out. My father joined the RAF, and he was posted here and there. But I had 2 wonderful years with him in Delhi. That was 1941, 42, when I didn't go to school, which was great. And he would, of course, he would be busy in the day going to the office, which was the air headquarters in South Block. But whenever he came home, he'd take me out to the pictures or to the bookshops, or if it was a Sunday, to monuments like the Qutub Minar or the Red Fort or Humayun's tomb. And he'd tell me the story about these places. So I learned a lot of history from him. And he collected stamps. He had this wonderful stamp collection, an album for different country, for each country. And from helping him with the stamps, and he'd tell me about the countries they came from. So I learned a lot of geography. And in fact, when I later went to school, I always stopped in geography. They don't teach much geography now to kids, actually. I presume it's just you learn it maybe from you watching travel shows on television, I suppose.
I have to check on that. I'm not sure about the geography curriculum of my little granddaughter. But
Yes, you must ask her.
so then which bookshops did you go to with your father?
He died while I was 10, still at school.
Oh.
Then I had to adjust in a way to my mother I had a stepfather. My mother had parents had separated, so I then had to adjust to my mother's home in Dehradun, and stepfather, he was a Punjabi gentleman. He was very decent to me. But we had a rather upside down life because his business, sort of the businesses he ran, which was cars mostly, he was always struggling. So we were always on the move from one house to another, or so there would be financial problems and things. Till I was packed off to England but I came back after 3 or 4 years with a book published.
Lovely. I mean, what an intense childhood, and what wonderful memories you still carry of your father.
I have good memories,
You,
especially for childhood and boyhood, growing up years. In fact, in general, of course, living now in up here in Missouri for so many years, like over 50 years, I think it, time sort of gets compressed, and something that happened maybe 20 years ago, it seems to be yesterday. Anyway, it isn't, I guess time isn't passing by. It's really you and I. Time is sort of stagnant.
passing.
Hmm?
But
Time is,
you have such an intense relationship with the mountains. If you remember, we co-edited a book together on the Himalaya, which is called Himalaya Adventures, Meditations, Life. And in your introduction, you said, and I'm quoting, you said, living in the mountains is not a romance for everyone. Wresting a living from the stony, calcified soil does not leave much time for poetry and contemplation. But it obviously has given you the inspiration for so much extraordinary writing. Tell us about your relationship with the mountains and with nature.
well, those lines you quoted there, of course, I was referring to the people of the hills who have to struggle for a living, and their fields are
Hard
uh,
life.
dependent very much on seasonal rainfall, and they can't even grow very much in those rather stony terraces. Um, but of course, I ran away from Delhi in a way in 1963, 64. It was. I'd been living in Delhi and working there for 3 or 4 years. And somehow I wasn't writing well there. I was dissatisfied with myself. And so I said, let me have a change. And I knew this area, of course, from boyhood. So that year came up, I rented a small cottage down in the forest, Maplewood Lodge.
Mhm.
And I was there 10 years. And in the beginning, for a couple of years, I was entirely on my own. Um, and I got to know the forest around me quite well because it was a forested area. And there were trees like oaks and walnuts and horse chestnuts, and a lot of birds, different kind of birds, even animals. A leopard would come prowling around sometimes, and I wrote a lot. I suddenly started writing, and then I turned out a lot of stories, including that's when I started writing stories for children too. The Blue Umbrella and Angry River, Panther's Moon, and I was even selling stories abroad too. So it was a very good period uh, from the literary point of view, and and I think I was helped and influenced by the natural world around me. I used to make my own breakfast. It's something I don't do anymore. And there was, in fact, I remember in the early days there was this over friendly crow who would come in and steal my boiled egg.
Mhm.
Mm. But I'd sort of got used to that too. So that then gradually the family grew around me. Um, Prem and his wife, and then Rakesh was born. He helped me to plant a cherry tree, which is also become a well-known storybook. And family grew up around me. So, and then later we moved up the hill to Landor, and I've been in Ivy Cottage for goodness me, 30 years. Yeah, 1980. Does that 40 years? You see, you can't count time up here. It doesn't mean anything. It's timeless up here. The mountains are timeless. I can tell you how many years I was in Delhi, almost exactly. I can tell you how many years I was in London, almost exactly. But I just cannot tell you exactly how long I've been in the hills.
You know, Ruskin, Ivy Cottage, Landor is a very famous address. But as the most famous Uttarakhandi of them all. I'm an Uttarakhandi too, like you. And I know that letters are often sent to you saying, Ruskin Bond, Mussoorie, and they always reach you. Do you still get a lot of letters, or people stopped writing letters in these days? Do
No,
they get emails? I remember all these letters you once shown me saying, Ruskin Bond, Mussoorie.
I do get letters, and of course the post office knows me, and all most of the postmen too. They come by courier as well, and some of them, but just recently, because I think maybe some visitors to Mussoorie located me by asking around in the market where I live, and they were always told above Doma's Cafe, which is a little Tibetan restaurant down the road. So now some letters even come care of Doma's Cafe. Although I'm not the most famous person living in Ivy Cottage, because at the other end of the building there's Vishal Budwaj, who's got his flat there.
Indeed.
He's been here a few years now. Of course, he has to live in Bombay. That's where.
Well, I would vote for you as the most famous landmark, and he can be the second most landmark.
Right. Yes, and there are other well-known people up on the hillside. But they come.
Landor is a beautiful community, which you could have several novels set just on the Landor gossip itself.
Yes.
So many of you. I've had such lovely evenings with you and Victor Banerjee and Pramod Kapoor and our own Lakshmi and us, all the rest.
Yeah, well, now, that's one thing we missed during this lockdown of over 2 months, I think. No gossip.
The community you have there.
That's true.
Oh.
Although in the last year or two, I haven't been going out much. I've become more of a, stay-at-home person. But that's, and I'm happy with my books and my writing and just being at home. So this doesn't hurt me, this lockdown.
No.
I've always worked from home, and I like being in my room and surrounded by books. So it doesn't hurt me. But I can see how it does affect young people. They like to get out and about, and of course, Mussoorie depends on tourism, and with all the hotels closed and no one in town, people are feeling it.
Ruskin, you are the essential storyteller. You can spin a yarn out of nothing. Do tell us a story, please, to all your fans. Perhaps the one about the tiger, or was it the leopard? Tiger, the leopard. I remember that entrancing story you told us once in Dehradun.
Okay. All right, the tiger. That's when I was a small boy, and my mother and stepfather had taken me out to this shikar expedition in the Rajaji sanctuary. At that time, it wasn't a sanctuary. You were allowed to shoot. And anyway, all the shikaris went off into the jungle, looking for game, and I was left in this forest bungalow, and I didn't mind because I had books to read, and there was an old bookshelf in fact in the bungalow, and so I was sitting in the veranda reading, and when I looked up, and suddenly in the clearing there was this huge tiger. So I quickly got up and darted inside and shut the door and bolted the door. And then I noticed the window was open. So I went to the window, and this tiger had come closer, and so I closed the window. Then I realized that the bathroom door was open at the back. So I dashed to the back of the bungalow and looked out, and the tiger had also circled around. It was looking for an entrance. And I think it had spotted me. And in those days, I was quite a chubby young boy. It probably made a good meal of me. So anyway, I closed the bathroom door too. And then I kept running around looking for doors and windows, which somehow were all open. And I kept locking them. And every time I looked out, there was the tiger. Anyway, I got everything locked and closed finally. And the thud thud, thud. Its paw was banging on the front door, and it wasn't a very strong door, you know. Um, anyway, I had to do something. So I pulled this dining table in, put it on the dining table, got onto the chair, and you know, you get those little skylights in these old bungalows. So I got through the skylight and onto the roof. And as I did that, crash, bang, the door burst open and in came this tiger. And it was in a bad mood because it couldn't find me. Anyway, it grabbed hold of my thermos flask and bit right through it. And then it prowled around and went out again. And it went outside. Finally, the chowkidar from the quarters behind the rest house spotted out and came out with his gun, bang, bang, bang. But of course, he didn't try to. I mean, his shots went wild. But the tigers, anyway, went off into the forest. So everything came back to normal finally. And after about an hour, my mother and stepfather and all came back to the forest without having shot anything. And he said, "You all right, Ruskin?" I said, "No, we look at the mess here. This tiger has been in the..." They didn't believe me. They thought I was making it all up. And of course, I'm making it all up.
Of course you were making it all up. I was in the audience the first time I heard you tell this story. And dear friends of JLF Brave New World, you've just been had because our friend Ruskin Bond has made up a story and got us all entranced and absolutely engrossed and on the edge of our chairs about what will happen to young Ruskin. And that was a cliffhanger, or what would you call it? Not a cliffhanger, a tiger roof hanger, I guess.
Tiger's tail.
Lovely. Okay, next sort of question in the same vein of questions that are not about your literary career. I'm told, dear Ruskin, that you are very, very fond of Guru Dutt's films and you have seen some of them. Which ones? And any songs or dialogues that you might remember for us?
Oh, going back to whose films you mentioned?
Guru Dutt.
Oh, Guru Dutt, of course, yeah. He was a very fine director, wasn't he? Well, I remember 2 or 3 of his films from the 1950s. That's when I used to go to the pictures a lot. Sometimes English movies, sometimes Hindi films, usually with friends. And as we saw, well, it must have been 1955 because the one film was called Mr. and Mrs. 55, in which he with the beautiful Madhubala. And then Pyasa, that's the one I remember best. And it was a very romantic, sad sort of story. And Pyasa, I think Wahida Rahman was the...
Yes, Pyasa was Wahida Rahman.
Opposite it. And it had that funny man called Johnny Walker. I think every film made in the 1940s and 50s somehow seemed to have Johnny Walker in it. You know, he sort of was in and out of all of them. Of course, that wasn't his real name. I don't forget what his real name was. Anyway, he was a funny character, and he had that song that became famous and is still popular, the one about where he's the barber, the hair cutting song.
You hum it for me?
You're going to ask me to sing it? People don't
I'm asking you to hum it, not sing it.
Hum it.
Sing it. Sing it, but what a joy our audience will feel to hear Ruskin Bond sing.
Sun, 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 are babu sun, is champin me bara bara gun. And I forget the rest.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, now we move to some serious questions, and then we move on. In your book, Confessions of a Book Lover, you say, during my last 2 years at school, an understanding senior master, Mr. Knight, put me in the school library, a capacious room a little distance from the classroom and dormitories. I was the sole possessor of the keys to this little bit of heaven. I would allow myself to be transported to another world through the pages of Somerset Maugham, J.B. Priestley, P.G. Wodehouse, J.M. Barrie, Compton Mackenzie, John Masefield, and other successful novelists, poets, playwrights of the 30s and the 40s. That's a great insight into some of the early influences. But who are your favorite writers? What are the books that influenced you in your work? And which are the books you go to again and again?
That's an interesting question, because just this morning, when I was jotting down some thoughts and ideas in my diary, I try to keep a diary too from time to time. And I was making a little list of books that I've read twice at least, sort of favorites that I've gone back to, or that I've wanted to read again for some reason. And the list, of course, was headed by Alice in Wonderland, which I must have read several times, and read to others too, read to children, because it's a good story to read aloud. So, of course, there's Alice in Wonderland. And then on a more adult note, The Story of My Heart by Richard Jefferies. He was a naturalist and also a very spiritual sort of man. And it sort of appealed to me, also as a nature lover. The Story of My Heart. And other books in that, Wuthering Heights. Now, I first read Wuthering Heights when I was 12, and on a stormy night in Dehradun, and the roof was leaking because we weren't in a very good house, and it kept me awake all night till I finished reading it about 3 or 4 in the morning, having started after dinner. And then for many years, of course, I hadn't read it again. And then only last year, I picked it up casually. There was a copy in my shelf, and I started reading it again at late evening. And once again, I was up all night. I couldn't stop until I'd finished it. So there's something about the passion in it, and the intensity of the writing which held me, and still does. So that's another one that's on my list of books that have been read twice over. But what else is there? So many, really. And of course, one often goes back to, lighter reading too. 3 Men in a Boat, or The Diary of a Nobody, or Agatha Christie, or P.G. Wodehouse, and the old favorites. And so there they are.
And what's the next book coming up, please? Good to know.
Let's see. There's the fourth in a series, the Boyhood Memoirs, which I did for Puffin Books, and this one is called Song of India, and this one is about that last year in Dehradun in India, 1951, before I sailed off to England. Of course, you sailed off in those days. You went by ship and came back by ship because the air services hadn't, quite got going. So that's about the friends I made, and about how I sold my first story, and how I, started becoming a writer. So it's a little memoir, about 10,000 words. It's called Song of India. That should be out any day. I think tomorrow, on my birthday. Normally, we'd have had a sort of book launch, and fun and games.
This is a book launch. I wish we had a copy of the cover with us, but and
Oh,
I'm
right.
sure we'll have many more books coming out in the next month or 2 or 3. All the publishers must be holding on to all that they're planning.
Holding on, they'll all come out at once, I'm afraid.
Sure. My last question is, any regrets at all?
As a writer, not really, because I think I've always worked within my limitations, or what I realized were my limitations, and therefore and within them I've worked to my satisfaction, done the things I wanted to do, written the sort of stories I wanted to write, and so as a writer, I have no regrets. As an individual and in one's personal life, naturally, we all sometimes can't have the things we want, or you might be in love and it all falls apart. So you can't have a perfect or a perfectly happy life, but you can have a contented life. And I think by and large I've had that because I've done the things I wanted to do and given myself the freedom to do these things, and never wanted too much. Never wanted too much out of life. Just I've just wanted to be able to write, to read, to have a little love and affection, and to give a little love and affection to others, and that's it. And physically, I've never been I would say a picture of health. I've been always chubby and tubby and um, uh, last in the marathon at school. So, but anyway, here I am, still around.
But if I could ask a last question to the last question, you said that you've written to your satisfaction within your limitations. That's for somebody who's written 150 books, to talk about your limitations is an act of, modesty, I would say. But how do you define your limitations?
And I've perhaps written on a small scale, and in that my most successful genre has probably been the short story or the novella. I haven't attempted a big book, a long novel or or a War and Peace or something like that. I've always sort of done what I realize I'm good at doing, and perhaps because maybe when I was younger, when I attempted something too radical or something that wasn't in my nature, it didn't come off. So I think we have to perhaps write out of our own natures, and then it comes off best.
That's a very wise thought as a writer to take it in. Now, before I sign off, we have some very special birthday wishes for you from Vishal Bharadwaj, who has collaborated with you to bring the stories to life of The Blue Umbrella and Saat Khoon Maaf. So here's your friend Vishal coming on.
Hello, Ruskin Saab. Happy birthday. I'm going to ask you 3 questions on your birthday. First one, has lockdown changed anything in your daily routine? I'm afraid not. Second one, when are you going to write a horror story for me to make a film? And how is the stock of alcohol at your place? Because I'm going to come to Mussoorie as soon as possible. Have a great day, Ruskin Saab. Many, many, many happy returns of the day. Sending love from Mumbai.
Well, I know that Vishal likes his whiskey, and but I've got a stock only of those tiny bottles of rum because the liquor shop had run out of the larger ones. But I know that Rekha, his wife, she drinks rum, so I can at least offer them some rum.
But what about the horror story?
Oh, the horror story! I was going to tell myself I must now stop frightening people, and but if Vishal wants a horror story, I'll cook up one for him. Maybe someone in connection with this virus it's going around. It could sort of get into my telephone. Something does get into my telephone from time to time, and I used to think it's the ghost, the resident ghost, but it could now be a virus, and create a little havoc in Mussoorie. But I'll think about it, Vishal, and cook and find something horrible to write if you really want a horror story.
And there was one more question, which was, has the lockdown changed anything in your daily routine? Probably not, he says on your behalf.
Not really, except that maybe I'm getting up earlier than usual because the birds have been coming around. Parrots have been coming, and they don't usually come up at this time of the year. Then there was an orange minaret the other day, and lots of little wagtails and small birds too. That's maybe because I'm getting up earlier in the morning, because later in the day, um, you don't see them so often. And there's the monkey that was outside my window too. And this morning, he comes there sometimes. And fortunately, I keep the window closed. So the monkey was there this morning making faces at me. So I made a face back at it, and it took off. I think my
Is
face.
another of your stories, like your tiger story?
No, there's monkeys around all over the place. And in fact, I don't know if I should tell you this. No, why not? It's a bit scatological because one morning I went into the bathroom and there was this monkey sitting on the potty.
Oh my God.
And, so I had to back away and shout and bang the door, and only then did he leave. He wasn't doing anything. He just found it a comfortable place to sit.
Right.
I say he, might have been a she. I can't tell. I don't remember.
So, no interview with Ruskin Bond can ever be complete without a child's point of view. And my granddaughter, Anina Sibal, sent a few questions when she heard that I was going to be speaking to you. So we'll bring on Anina with her exhaustive list of questions, and let's see which of them you can answer.
Hello, my name is Anina Sibal. I'm 8 years old and I wanted to ask you a few questions about your book. Great stories for children. So my first question is, how long did you take to write this book?
How long did I take to write it? Well, those are stories written at different periods of my life, and then they were put together by the publisher. So the book itself took me no time at all because those stories were already there.
My second question is, in The School Among the Pines, why did you name the children Prakash, Sonu, and Beena?
I just made up the names out of a hat, more or less. They just came to me. Of course, the children were in a way also fictitious, but the school was perhaps based on a little school down in one of the villages close by, where I'd gone for a walk. The characters, the children were based on real children. So sometimes there's more fiction than fact, sometimes more fact than fiction. Or they all blend together sometimes to make a story.
The third question she asked is,
my third question is, how many copies have you sold of this book?
Very
sort of a direct question.
Of this particular book?
Yes.
Great Stories for Children?
Yes.
Well, the last time my publishers did give me a figure, it was around 3 lakhs.
Wow.
I think so. Yes. You can check with Rupa.
Last question is, are any of these stories actually related to you or have actually happened, some of them? Thank you for your time.
Oh, yes, very often some of them are based on things that have happened to me or people or children I've known. But I do sometimes fictionalize. I might take an incident, an episode, and sort of use it to develop a story around it. So while I might have seen a tiger in the forest clearing, in the story, it's actually after me.
So on that note, we sign off with felicitations across generations to one of the funniest, wisest, most generous persons I have ever encountered.
Namita,
and thank you for joining us, and all the best for this new birthday year. And hope to see you soon in Missouri, in Ivy Cottage, Bangalore.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely interview and all that.
I had so much fun.
Ruskin Bond, Namita Gokhale, thank you for that incredible session. It's been an absolute privilege to listen to both of you. Ruskin Bond, a happy birthday from all of us. Thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. And sorry we haven't been able to take your questions today as we recorded this session earlier. Ruskin Bond was in Landor and we were not sure about the bandwidth issue. We thank our official radio partner, Red FM, Bajate Raho. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and will log back at 9 p.m. for our next session. For Economics, the Human Toll. Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo in conversation. This session will be presented in partnership with York University's Festival of Ideas. Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo were awarded the 2019 Nobel Prize for their work on poverty alleviation. They speak of the human toll of the pandemic in the world economy and the global south and discuss measures and strategies to fight back the catastrophe, including the concept of a universal ultra-basic income. We now present a short extract from the archives of the Jaipur Music Stage featuring Papon. Angarag Mahanta, known by his stage name Papon, hails from Assam. Papon also worked as a singer, songwriter, and music director in Assamese and Bollywood films. He is the lead singer and founder of the folk music band the Papon and the East India Company. Enjoy the music and see you back at 9 p.m.
चल तू साथ साथ डर लगे बार बार सुनने रच